Russia's war in Ukraine has entered its second year. US-China tensions continue to rise. Iran still threatens to obliterate its will, and nuclear weapons have been mentioned many times in recent global conferences. The G7, which met for a summit in Hiroshima in May, pledged to promote responsible behavior on nuclear weapons, such as better transparency about member states' nuclear arsenals. However, in terms of efforts to reduce nuclear weapons globally, in the current context, it has completely failed. There are many reasons for this failure. Washington and Moscow are once again competing in the nuclear sphere. In addition, China has entered an arms race, making the game a triple. Advanced technologies such as artificial intelligence provide the military with new capabilities, blurring the lines between conventional and nuclear weapons technology. The parties are blaming each other. In November 2022, Russia accused the United States of wrongdoing, leading to the collapse of negotiations on strategic stability. Moscow similarly argued to suspend the New START Treaty on strategic offensive arms reduction. China has been largely silenced on these events. China, which refused to join nuclear arms reduction treaties, is still developing quietly, saying its numbers are much smaller than that of the US and Russia. Regardless of which side is at fault, the global effort to control and reduce nuclear weapons is deemed to have failed. According to experts, this means the United States must turn its commitments at the G7 summit into a more inclusive agenda. In the immediate future, instead of focusing on arms reduction, the United States can encourage parties to be more transparent, create channels of communication during the crisis, to avoid misunderstanding that lead to risk of using nuclear weapons. This approach could make nuclear weapon states more accountable. According to unofficial statistics, there are currently about 9 countries possessing nuclear weapons. The first is Russia, which possesses about 5,977 nuclear weapons units, such as nuclear warheads or nuclear bombs. Next is the United States with 5,428 units, China 350 units, France 290 units, UK 225 units, Pakistan 165 units, India 160 units, Israel 90 units, and North Korea 20 units. For years and even decades, experts have warned of impending failure to control nuclear weapons. When the United States pulled out of the anti-ballistic missile treaty with Russia in 2002, nuclear analyst Pavel Pofic declared that the end of strategic arms control appeared to be near. In 2019, when Russia violated the Immediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty by testing missiles within a prohibited range, Washington responded by withdrawing from the treaty, leading to arms control seemingly re-entering a hopeless phase. In 2020, after President Donald Trump withdrew the United States from the Open Skies Treaty, an agreement that allows the United States, Russia, and other signatories to conduct unarmed surveillance flights over each other's airspace, U.S. Ambassador Bonnie Jenkins, who helped negotiate the treaty, lamented that Washington seemed to have a little vision about the consequences of breaking trust-enhanced agreements like these. At the time, Ambassador Jenkins' lament seemed a bit premature, but when Russia suspended the bilateral New START agreement in 2023, the warning came true. Bilateral highly formalized nuclear treaties, including limits on the nuclear and types of the nuclear weapons a country can maintain, are now a thing of the past. The entire network of deals is gone. For example, New START restricts the United States and Russia to deploy no more than 1,550 strategic warheads. To reach a similar legally binding agreement today would be politically unfeasible. As a result, the United States and its allies face numerous arms control challenges. Obviously, they shouldn't pressure arms control just for the sake of arms control. Any arms control program should be aligned with tangible strategic goals. The Biden administration's 2022 nuclear assessment has identified accompanying benefits, including reducing the risk of a costly arms race, enhancing strategic stability, and reducing the risk of nuclear collisions. The G7 leaders' statement also highlighted the importance of risk reduction strategies, forms of cooperation to prevent military incidents before they escalate into a crisis or greater war. Of course, achieving these goals will be difficult, and any arms control agenda must take into account geopolitical competition and rapidly evolving technology such as artificial intelligence or cyber attack. Throughout the Cold War, avoiding nuclear confrontation was a core goal of arms control between the US and the Soviet Union. Although the agreements have collapsed, today the principle of avoiding nuclear war is still considered the most important. That is why US President Joe Biden urged countries not to start a third world war while the war in Ukraine was still complicated. Even the use of small nuclear weapons or tactical nuclear weapons is taboo. This principle was emphasized at the G20 summit in Indonesia in November 2022. A joint effort is needed to ensure nuclear weapons are not used in the 21st century. Avoiding nuclear war remains a common goal globally. Nowadays, there is an increasing risk of nuclear weapons being used. For example, cyber attacks targeting nuclear weapons control and command systems. Cyber attacks or missiles on early warning satellites also create serious problems. The testing of nuclear weapons, also seen as a significant escalation, leads to a rise and increases the risk of a clash. What happens in Northeast Asia regarding North Korea's nuclear program is an example. Although the United States adhered to the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, unfortunately, Washington has not ratified the treaty along with China and several other countries. A focus on preventing destabilizing behavior and promoting good behavior should be the cornerstone of a new phase of arms control. In particular, states can take actions that strengthen global stability, such as announcing missile tests in advance, moving nuclear weapons, announcing the number of warheads each year, and implementing steps to avoid a clash that could escalate into a major conflict, especially between countries that are close to each other. These types, scenes between NATO and Russian aircraft over the Black Sea, are often the result of ignoring existing risk reduction measures, such as the Agreement on Incidents Above Sea in 1972. Securing a degree of human control over nuclear decision-making was also widely advocated. This type of arms control approach, action by action, transparent and informed to partners, may involve the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, which is China, France, Russia, the United Kingdom, and the United States, but can also include as many nuclear and non-nuclear powers as possible. To date, no country has really taken it seriously to come up with an acceptable code of conduct. Behavioral arms control, which could lay the groundwork for deeper cooperation as geopolitical conditions improve. The final arms control action will likely rest on American leadership. Given the political polarization in the United States, this will be no small challenge, but strengthening global stability and acting like a responsible power must include taking the lead on arms control. However, allies and partners also play an important role. Most importantly, partners as interlocutors aiming for global stability and prosperity should not take sides in the great power rivalry. Those countries such as Brazil, India, or South Africa might welcome America's responsible stance on global stability. U.S. allies that often have an equally strong multilateral record, such as Germany, will play a role in ensuring that the states of the Southern Hemisphere have a real role and voice in the arms control agenda. Gathering as many supporters as possible in the Southern Hemisphere is essential. Washington and its allies will have to convince governments in Brazil, Mexico, India, and South Africa. These countries do not have nuclear weapons but have a responsibility for assessing and disarmament. Washington must convince skeptical states around the world that they can agree on certain rules regarding to responsible behavior with respect to nuclear weapons. The same can apply to Russia and China. In the past, Washington has sometimes forced other countries to regulate certain behaviors while exempting itself. In a multipolar global order, this approach does not work. By opening the door to developing countries and in the Southern Hemisphere the opportunity to participate in regulation on an equal basis, Washington can convince the countries that the United States is taking it seriously. One proposal should be made by the White House for the P5, consisting of China, France, Russia, the United Kingdom, and the United States, to play a larger role in arms control. While such effort should indeed be pursued, nuclear risk reduction in the 21st century must appeal to a broader and more diverse audience. The G20 is another important forum for such a process, as it includes the United States, its allies, China, and Russia, as well as many heavyweights from the Southern Hemisphere. To gain attraction with Russia and China, Washington must offer something that will interest its adversaries. An official confirmation to China that both countries will suffer unprecedented damage if they attack each other with nuclear weapons is essentially a confirmation of reality for decades, so avoid behaviors that could bring them to the nuclear brink. But such a confirmation would be quite controversial in some places like the US, South Korea, or Japan. Among these allies, Japan fears that Washington might give in to China's nuclear threats, exposing allies in the region to China's domination, especially about the island dispute. Today, Russia fears that the US military could one day reduce mass-scale strategic deterrence by using a combination of conventional missiles, defense, and precision strike weapons. But again, a claim like China may not be well received by US allies in Europe, which see the missiles defense system as having important political and strategic significance. Like official arms control treaties of the past, behavioral arms control will balance protecting the security of the United States and its allies while attracting new attention from Beijing and Moscow. Even if China and Russia ultimately reject such an approach, bringing together as many nations as possible behind a behavior-based agenda slows down the risk of nuclear weapons across the globe, helping the United States win much-needed credibility around the world. Many experts also believe that the goal of the G20 is a global charter for responsible military behavior. The Cold War offered some valuable lessons. In 1975, the Soviet Union and the United States agreed on the Helsinki Agreement, which agreed to establish common codes of conduct in the military, social, and economic fields. Although the charter is not binding, the principle is recognized, contribute to risk management, and contribute to reducing tensions in the global confrontation. It is difficult to imagine Russia engaging in such an approach when it has just announced plans to deploy tactical nuclear weapons to Belarus. However, looking back at history, almost no one would have thought that an East-West agreement like Helsinki could have taken place at that time. In the current context, experts say that arms control agreements between Russia and the West will depend on the outcome of the Ukraine war and Russia's actions in Ukraine afterward. An arms control program that focuses on behavior change rather than restricting the arsenal also have some downsides compared with the meticulously negotiated arms deals in previous years. The program will be less formal, thus less binding. Verification of behavior for compliance will be very complex, as is the option of punishment not so simple. In the current competitive environment, a behavior-based approach could be the last resort of arms control. That's the value of taking the potential risk. This approach can build on existing initiatives. NATO recently adopted a common principle on responsible use of artificial intelligence. The UK is currently looking to set global norms of behavior to reduce the risk of conflict in space. Russia, despite the suspensions of New START, continues to notify the United States of missile tests. Former Munich Security Conference Chairman Wolfgang Ischinger recently suggested that Moscow would not deploy nuclear system in Belarus. In return, Washington would not deploy such weapons in Poland and the eastern countries. The United States should push NATO to develop a code of responsible behavior to create a new arms control structure. For example, the United States could propose a ban on testing satellite launching system in orbit, with which China has tested out its own satellites. These weapons and similar tests have the potential to escalate the crisis and spark on an arms race. According to some experts, behaviorally focused arms control may be the most promising way to manage competition and avoid global instability. It is also a last resort towards avoiding the risk of using nuclear weapons. The outcomes could be very different from past arms control agreements, but it would be better in future when nuclear proliferation is free. That has wrapped up our program today. Thank you for your watching and see you next time.